Hi, I'm Larry Sassano. I'm the president of Florida's Great Northwest, and I'm delighted to be with you today and recognize my special guest, Jorge Gonzalez. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Larry.
George, of course, is the Senior Vice President of Development for the St. Joe Company, and I've gotten to know George fairly well in meeting with him and being at different events, and he's got some exciting things to share with us today about the St. Joe Company. Some of the changes, some of the developments that they are working on or that are in the works. And, just for those of you that are not familiar with St. Joe, I can't imagine any of you out there not familiar with them, but they're a Florida-based real estate development company that owns thousands of acres of land concentrated primarily in Northwest Florida and have significant residential, commercial, and industrial developments taking place as well. And today, George is going to talk about some of these projects, as I said, but also about the Port of St. Joe. And I think that's something that I think George told me he gets a lot of questions about. So how long have you been with the St. Joe Company, George?
I've been with the St. Joe Company 11 years now.
Wow. I think you've seen a lot of changes already in 11 years, haven't you?
I have. A lot of changes in the company and a lot of changes in our region and in the marketplace.
Yeah. What would you say, before we get into some of the developments, is the biggest changes you've seen take place, perhaps in our region and then with St. Joe itself?
Absolutely. In the region, there's been an added emphasis on growing the region, yes, on diversifying the economy in Northwest Florida, which is important to many of us. I've seen that change occur. Of course, we've had a pretty significant recession over the last few years, and that has affected the trajectory a little bit. But now the trend is positive. So the focus on diversifying the economy of the region is probably the most significant change I've seen.
Yeah, I think in terms of you yourself, I want to still focus on you for a minute, George. I've seen you involved in several not-for-profit community development type organizations and activities. One comes to mind is the Northwest Florida Manufacturing Council. Why do you do that? I mean, is it something that, is that your philosophy, or is that just part of the St. Joe philosophy to get involved at the local level like that?
Thank you for asking, Larry. It's a little bit of both. We think it's really important as a company, and I feel the same way as an individual, to be involved civically, to be involved in the communities that we operate in. So we understand the people, we know the organizations, and we can assist in any way we can. I'm actually involved in several civic groups. I'm on the board of the Panama City campus of Florida State University. I'm the acting vice chairman. I'm on the board of the Bay County Economic Development Alliance. I'm also on the board of the St. Joe Community Foundation. Those are all civic, not-for-profit groups that really have the interests of the region in mind, in growing the region.
Well, George has such a nice way about him. He's so believable and trustworthy that when you get to meet him for the first time, you say, this is a genuine individual, and I appreciate that about you, George.
Thank you, Larry.
Well, let's talk about some of the projects that are in the works right now and in the residential and commercial field.
Absolutely. The St. Joe Company, as you mentioned earlier, we have a pretty diversified interest. We own a little bit under 600,000 acres in Northwest Florida. That's a lot of acres.
It's a lot of acres.
We have traditionally operated in timber, and we still have a very significant timber operations division. In fact, the majority of the 600,000 acres are in timber and will be in timber for a very long time. Yeah. We also have interest in real estate, residential, commercial, industrial, as you mentioned. And of course, we have an interest in resort operations. The company owns a couple of marinas, the Watercolor Inn, a lodging facility, and several golf courses. So we operate in those three segments, timber, real estate, and resort operations. Depending on where one is from, they have a context of what the company does. So for example, in Walton County, that's where we have our flagship resort residential communities like Watercolor, Watersound Beach. So citizens in Walton County know the St. Joe Company primarily because of those projects. In Bay County, of course, we have a lot of interest around the new Northwest Florida International Airport, Beaches International Airport. actively involved, along with Florida's Great Northwest and the Bay County EDA, in creating jobs and bringing economic development to the region. So in Bay County, we're known for those interests. We also have primary housing communities, significant ones, in Tallahassee, Southwood. So folks in Tallahassee know us more for Southwood. So pretty diversified level of interest in projects. It's not just one type.
But you know, something I've noticed about all of the St. Joe projects, and I've been to Tallahassee and Southwick. Of course, watercolor, we love that, and they're all quality. You know, they all have a nice quality way about them, and I think that's pretty much seems to be the philosophy of St. Joe. If you're going to build something, you're going to provide something, whether it's commercial or resort, give it the best look and quality that you possibly can.
Appreciate it, Larry. That's a big emphasis of ours. We spend a lot of time planning our projects and making sure the projects are compatible with and add to the value of the communities they're in. We view our real estate development projects not just as projects that exist on a spreadsheet. They are tangible projects that affect people's lives on a daily basis. You drive by them, you see them, the way they interact with the environment. Those are all things that are really, really important to us beyond the economics of the projects. So you're absolutely correct. We do spend a lot of time in planning these projects to attain the highest quality possible.
You mentioned to me before we taped about what's happening in Pier Park there as well. And my wife's very familiar with Pier Park, as I am. But you're developing across the street from Pier Park now, adding on. It's that successful. Can you talk about your partnership there as well?
Absolutely. We own the land, as mentioned before, the 600,000 acres. Sometimes we develop the properties ourselves. Sometimes we sell the property to other developers, and sometimes we joint venture. In a project that we call Pier Park Northeast, which is directly across from Pier Park in Panama City Beach. That's an example of one where we partnered with Casto. They've been a great partner so far. We created a joint venture with them, and we've been fortunate enough to have the project underway. We broke ground last year. It's a 400,000 square foot retail center. Wow. We're expected to be open this spring. And we're fortunate enough to be able to announce that we're at 80% pre-leased. Wow. With some pretty significant anchor tenants like Dick's Sporting Goods, Bed Bath & Beyond, and similar anchor tenants, which is really exciting to us, particularly over the last couple of years and the recession that we've all been through, to have that level of reception and that level of interest in a project of that size is very encouraging to us, not just to the St. Joe company, but to the region, because the investments that are being made in that shopping center by these national brand stores, that's a validation of the region, that they believe the region is healthy and Absolutely. The region has a future.
Well, what you're talking about, will that be the largest retail center in Northwest Florida? It's got to be.
Well, it's one of the larger ones, and one of the things that we are really excited about when you look at new construction starts of centers of that size, it's really, we believe, the largest one in the Southeast, if not one of the largest ones in many, many years.
Wonderful. Well, I know a couple of customers that will be over there for that. You know. Well, let's talk about the something that I know that you get asked quite a bit, and that is what's happening. And I want to spend a little time on this because I think it's critical for this region to see what's happening with what St. Joe's doing at the Port of St. Joe. Now, we go in that area periodically to Mexico Beach and so forth because they have festivals, but the port itself being developed in the manner of which you're going to tell our audience is taking place, what are some of the obstacles that you're running across? What has to be done, to really develop the port the way you see it?
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. And that's a project that's near and dear to my heart. The Port of St. Joe is something that's a very high priority for the company to get redeveloped and established. Yeah. And the company has had a long history with that community. As you and your audience may know, the company operated a paper mill from the 1930s to the late 1990s in Port St. Joe, so that we go way back in that community with our history, shared history. The property that we own, where the paper mill used to be located, is currently a brownfield. The project has been redeveloped. There was contamination and has been remediated. The property sits with a bulkhead, and it sits right next to a deep water channel that's federally authorized to 37 feet of depth. In addition to that, there's a rail connection that we own. We own the Apalachicola Northern Railroad, the company does, that connects that property to a CSX main line in Chattahoochee. It's a short line. It's about a 92-mile short line. So when we looked at just those ingredients alone, the history we've had in that community, the fact that this property is 180 acres and it's ready to be redeveloped for an economic development purpose. We looked at the adjacency to the Deepwater Channel, the proximity of rail. It didn't take us long to realize that there was some pretty good potential to reestablish a port type of operation on that property. One of the things that we did initially is partner with the Port St. Joe Port Authority. The Port Authority is one of the 15 designated port authorities in the state. They own approximately 100 acres right next to our property on the Gulf County Canal. And we didn't view it as competing with them. We didn't view it as trying to attract a different type of industry to the community. We figured the best way to do it is to do it as partners. And we executed a series of agreements with the Port Authority to plan and try to attract a port operation.
So the other two ports in our region, Port of Pensacola, Port of Panama City, I know Port of Panama City has been getting more heavily involved with containerized shipments. What is the direction that St. Joe would like to take the Port of St. Joe?
Absolutely. One of the things that we did in partnership with the Port Authority and with a lot of individuals that we spoke with, just to be a little bit smarter about what the real potential is. Port operation is not our core competency. But we own the asset, so we got a little bit smarter about what the real potential is, and we wanted to be grounded. We wanted to really understand what the realistic potential is and not move forward with something that was not realistic. And after a lot of time studying what the real potential is, we determined that bulk cargo, as opposed to container cargo, might have more short-term potential in Port St. Joe than containers. A number of reasons for that. But the ingredients that we have there in place, particularly with the rail is a preferred method of bulk cargo. We believe that the property in Port St. Joe is uniquely and strategically situated to develop that type of port operation. The Port St. Joe is also, if not the closest, one of the closest ports to the Panama Canal. And as your audience knows, there's a significant investment that's going on in the canal right now to widen it to what they call post-Panamax vessels, which would carry a host of different cargo. But because of the strategic nature of Port St. Joe and the ingredients that are there, we believe the realistic market to go after is bulk cargo.
Can you give some examples to our audience about what that really involves, bulk cargo?
Absolutely. There are things like wood pellets, biomass, aggregates, anything that's not a consumer-based product that's placed in a container is bulk cargo. So
one of my other guests was Martin Harris and from Green Energy, and they, of course, are doing significant export of their pellets from Jackson County facility there. And from what Martin told our audience, they're growing, beyond what they expected to, even at this point. So that growth, which a lot of their shipments, I guess, go through the Port of Panama City, but because of their growth, that potentially could happen as well in Port of St. Joe. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned Morton. Morton is one of the individuals that we've been working with, and we were very happy to announce a number of months ago that we actually executed a letter of intent with Green Circle to look at the opportunity to develop a new plant a new biomass wood pellet plant along the AN Railway, which is the railway that we own,
Right.
and take those wood pellets to Port St. Joe. Now, one thing that's really important for your audience to keep in mind, this is a net add, a net addition to their investment in Northwest
Right,
Florida.
that's a good point, thank you.
So it's not taking anything away from their relationship with Port Panama City. We consider Port Panama City an integral part in Northwest Florida's economy, and Wayne Stubbs, their director, has done a fantastic job over the years. So what we're doing with Green Circle in the execution of the letter of intent is addition to, a net addition to what's going on in Port Panama City. The idea would be where we would source fiber to produce the wood pellets to Green Circle. They would build a plant, another plant in Northwest Florida, a second one. You mentioned the first one that they have today in Cottondale, Florida. Right. And then those wood pellets would be shipped through rail, potentially, perhaps truck also, depending on the circumstances, to Port St. Joe. And the port would be potentially the first tenant that we could have at the port.
What do you see as some of the obstacles leading up to, the dredging, for example? What's magical about the 37-foot depth?
Absolutely, and there are challenges. It's a upstart port. New ports are not started every day, so there's a lot of moving parts to it. The good news is that we have 180 acres, a blank sheet of paper. That's also the bad news. There's a lot of investment that has to be made in getting the port up and running. The most significant one is to dredge the channel. Right. The channel that is right next to the property is federally authorized to a depth of 35 to 37 feet. The significance of that is that most bulk cargo vessels can operate in that depth.
Okay.
There's different types of vessels that are used for containers and bulk cargo, and based on our research and study, we've determined that just about every kind of bulk cargo vessel would be able to use a channel of that depth. So the biggest investment that has to be made, the biggest challenge, is to dredge the channel. We're not seeking to get a depth greater than what's authorized. We believe the 35 to 37 will work for bulk cargo. In fact, are pretty sure of that. But the channel hasn't been dredged in a very long time. I believe the last time that it was dredged was in the late 1980s.
Wow.
So over time, as you can imagine, sediment accumulates in the channel. So the limiting depth right now is in the mid-20s. There are areas that are in the low 30s. So the investment that needs to be made to dredge the channel to enable the vessels to go through the channel is pretty significant.
Sure. And a timeline?
We're working very actively with our partners, State of Florida, the federal government, also the Corps of Engineers, to plot a path to success on getting the channel dredged. And obviously, nobody wants to make investments, as they shouldn't, without having some certainty that the investment will have a return on investment. Green Circle is the letter of intent that we executed with them is an answer, or one of the potential answers to what that return on investment might be. We don't have a specific timeline at this moment. We are fortunate enough to are about to start the permitting process, because we do have to permit, even though it's federally authorized to that depth, we still have to permit it. In fact, we had a pre-application conference with the agencies last week.
Now, this federal and state permitting?
Correct. We have to go through the Corps of Engineers to obtain their permit, and we also have to go through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to obtain their permits. They've been very cooperative so far. Everybody's working as a team, and we greatly appreciate the state's interest. The state has been very interested and very helpful in the idea of getting this port started, because I think the state realizes that ports are an engine that can be a potential economic development engine to create jobs and economic activity, not just in that community, but in the region. Yeah,
that's another thing I wanted to talk about, is the impact that what St. Joe is doing to create the infrastructure around the port, how it will impact not only Gulf County, but Franklin County and even Bay County, and all those surrounding counties there will be positively impacted by that growth over a period of time. And I think that from what I've read, the governor's office is very supportive of providing logistics infrastructure support for the ports, realizing the proximity of our ports to the expansion of the Panama Canal. So that's got to be a great factor in moving forward with this project as well.
Absolutely. The governor's emphasis on growing the Florida economy through ports and the importance of logistics in terms of growing the economy and creating jobs has just been a blessing for all of us. The Florida Department of Transportation, they have been fantastic in their emphasis on logistics in ports, very cooperative. But grounded. They want to make sure that, as they should, that any investment that taxpayers make is an investment that will have a tangible return on investment. And those are the types of discussions that we're having right now.
Excellent. You know, for the Great Northwest, we, of course, want to offer whatever support we can to the Port Authority and to the St. Joe Company and to the local leadership there in that area. And so we've done a little research also on the availability of incentives to attract companies that are interested in utilization of the port there once it's up and running. And one of the things that's real positive is having that the enterprise zone right there. And so I pulled up a couple layouts of that area there around the port, and at all the fathers planning their growth in those counties, particularly Gulf County there, have made sure that they've got those local incentives and state incentives available, even though they may not have been able to take advantage of them up until now. They're in place. That's good forward thinking, you know.
Absolutely.
So our job is to help you and help the county and the communities surrounding it to lessen the cost and the burden of going through those regulatory issues. So, as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. And we have valued our relationship with Florida's Great Northwest. I think the emphasis on growing the region as a whole is critical. Obviously, the coordination with the local economic development groups is critical because we believe the potential the port has in Port St. Joe is not just a local economic development story, but a regional one.
Yes.
And the emphasis of Florida's Great Northwest on the region is just very compatible with that approach.
Thank you. Well, I'm impressed with your with Park and you and everyone I've met at your team there. It seems that you're all flowing in the same direction. That's a nice approach to take. We only have a few more minutes, so I'd like maybe two more questions to ask of you. And one is, what can we do as an organization to help you to get that philosophy out and help grow this region? Because you told me before that St. Joe's philosophy is not just to help itself in terms of where it has a presence, a physical presence, but to help the region, because if the region benefits, everybody benefits individually as well.
Absolutely. And before I do that, Larry, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we did execute a second letter of intent. I didn't want to
yes, that's right. I meant thank you for reminding me about
the
that.
second group. In addition to Green Circle, we were fortunate enough to execute a second letter of intent, biomass wood pellets, with a company called Innova Energy Group.
Yes, I had that in there. I forgot to ask you about that.
That's okay. They're located in Georgia, and they're in a process right now of planning various different new wood pellet plants. And they've agreed, subject to planning and subject to dredging, of course, that they would bring a significant portion of wood pellets on our railroad to Port St. Joe also.
Wow. So
in addition to Green Circle, we have a second company that has stepped up to the plate and indicated a very strong interest in coming to Port St. Joe.
Well, that leads me to another question then. Is there room for any more?
Absolutely. In fact, the footprint that both of these companies would take on the 180 acres is very insignificant to the 180 acres. It's a very small portion. Ports are historically land constrained because, as you can imagine, ports have been around for a long time and they grew in old urban areas. Yeah. So there was a lot of growth around them. So ports typically have a land constraint. That's one of the benefits that we have in trying to create this port in Port St. Joe. We have 180 acres, which is pretty significant, and it's a blank sheet of paper. So land is not a constraint to grow this port. So we're fortunate enough to get started with this port operation with Green Circle and Innova. we view those as the first two tenants of many, many other tenants.
Well, that's an excellent point. And I hadn't, until you said that, I hadn't thought about the fact that you don't have the land constraints that a lot of ports do have today.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. I'll go back to my question again. What can we do, as a economic development organization to help companies like St. Joe in growing this region a little better?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking the question. And to us, it's really important and really critical. Our footprint is in Northwest Florida.
Yeah.
Northwest Florida is a very special part, not only of the state, but a very special part of the country. We believe as Northwest Florida goes, so does the St. Joe Company. So success for Northwest Florida, from an economic development perspective, for example, no matter where the success is a success for our company. We go as the region goes, and the region goes as we go. So that's a fundamental philosophy that we feel pretty strongly about. And to grow a region, it takes partners. It cannot be done by a single entity, by a single individual. So the partnership that we have with Florida's Great Northwest, and Florida's Great Northwest has with many other partners, is really critical in continuing the growth of Northwest Florida in a way that's consistent with the lifestyles that we have here.
Absolutely.
The quality of life that we have here is amazing, as you know, and that is what attracts a lot of people to this part of the world, and nobody wants to in any way negatively impact that quality of life.
You've been listening to, I know you've enjoyed it, I've enjoyed it, Jorge Gonzalez, Senior Vice President of Development for the St. Joe Company. George, what a pleasure having you on today, and I hope I can bring you back in a year and maybe give us an update on what's happening with the port and some of the other projects as well.
So thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today on Florida's Great Northwest. I'm your host, Larry Sassano. Jorge Gonzalez from St. Joe Company. We thank you and hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, and we'll see you again.